And now. Ready.
Welcome everyone to this Project Rozana webinar, the power of people-to-people peace building. We have participants from a number of countries other than Australia. Welcome to all. As I noted, the focus of this event is on the power and potential of people-to-people peace building. This is a noble aspiration. It is, however, predicated on needed, essential preliminary steps. Of critical importance is the capacity that we have to contribute to the building of trust in a region where surveys tell us 90% of Palestinians don't trust Israelis and 80% of Israelis don't trust Palestinians. The mission of Project Rozana is to build better understanding between Israelis and Palestinians through health. We do that in multiple cross-border and respectful ways. We address the existential, immediate needs of Palestinian children through Wheels of Hope and invest in long-term, agreed, strategic capacity building that, over time, will ensure those same children and their families will receive the care they need in well-resourced Palestinian hospitals. Project Rozana's Wheels of Hope program, for which we are currently in the middle of a national fundraising campaign, deals with the here and now. Our other initiatives build for a healthier future for Palestinians. Together, our programs enable tens of thousands of people on both sides of this 70-plus year conflict to get to know the other. These are the threads that we are drawing together to weave a fabric that will underpin a future where both Israelis and Palestinians can live side by side in peace and security. Our panel this evening, moderated by Hugh Riminton, will explore these issues. I'm now honored to hand over to Hugh Riminton. Hugh is an award-winning journalist, humanitarian, news presenter, and foreign correspondent of many years' experience. Currently a senior reporter for Network 10, Hugh's been a foreign correspondent for CNN and the 9 Network and the political editor at Channel 10. Hugh.
Ron, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for giving up a bit of your Sunday just to hear of what Project Rozana and Wheels of Hope have been doing. And it's extraordinary in these lockdown COVID age that we're in. We can pull together across the world this extraordinary panel. So let me introduce them to you. From Dura in Hebron, Huda Abu Akob, who's the regional director of AllMap. From Melbourne, Tim Costello, well known to all Australians as the former head of World Vision, a social justice advocate of many years standing. And from Kibbutz Be'eri, just on the Gaza border, Vivian Silva joins us. Vivian is the former co-executive director of Ajik Nizped. The Nizped is the Negev Institute of Strategies of Peace and Development. She's also, most importantly for what we're going to be talking about tonight, a volunteer driver for the Road to Recovery project. So I'd like to welcome all of our panel. And perhaps I can start with you, Vivian. You live right on the border of Gaza. We've seen in recent weeks and months the terrible stresses once again flaring up in Gaza. As a volunteer driver for this program, how important is it for you to be involved in what goes on?
Well, yeah, it's over the years, it's been very challenging, but living here has been very challenging. However, driving for for Recovery is one of the tools that keeps me sane anyway. It keeps me hopeful. It's a very small thing that we do. And I'm not the only one, by the way, on my kibbutz that drives. There are 5 other women who are approximately my age who continue driving over the years. What it helps us do is stop the demonization of the other and humanize each other, both sides. So on a personal level, driving keeps that spark of hope and lets us avoid total discouragement.
So, in a practical terms, then, Vivian, who do you transport, and what are the kinds of medical issues that you're trying to deal with when you do what you do?
Well, we're assigned patients the night before. Not all patients know that they are going to get the permit to come over. They need 3 permits, by the way. They need one from the Hamas, they need one from the Palestinian Authority, and they need one from Israel. So it's not always easy for them. Road for Recovery is totally volunteer based. There's about 1,000 drivers around the country. My route is generally from the Erez crossing, which is the only border that people can cross over from Gaza to Israel. And it's about a 25-minute drive from here, from my home. And I normally drive to hospitals in Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, but also West Jerusalem, depending on the need of the patient and what the PA is prepared, where the PA is prepared for the patients to get their treatment. It can be cancer, it can be eye treatment, but they're pretty severe cases.
And Huda, living in the Palestinian territories on the West Bank in Hebron, how important is this for you to see this effort taking place, both in practical terms for those individuals who, of course, are helped by it, but also in a broader sense that somehow or other there are these tendrils of trust and care that still exist?
Thank you, Hugh, for the question. I think the fact that I am living here is sometimes is a privilege that gives me a sense of how people to people are dignifying their relationship amidst a very indignifying relationship between our leaders. And I think this is where I see the needle of hope moving from no hope to hope, when people on that level of humanity and dignifying that kind of humanity actually takes people from a place of being enemies to a place of being friends on a journey of pain and recovery. That's why Rozana, with its projects on the ground, is important to me as the Alliance for Middle East Peace, because this is the kind of relationship that we want to build between people, that relationship that is dignifying to both human beings on the both ends of the spectrum, rather than being trapped in an indignifying political arguments. These people are connecting on a level of pain and recovery. They see themselves as human beings, and this is something I don't know about the world, but it's one of the struggles in Palestine and Israel, to keep that sense of humanity and to keep that sense of dignity, so as not to fall into the trap and the cycle of victimhood and hatred. This is where the needle actually moves, the hope needles move. But 25 years of negotiations did not get one Palestinian or one Israeli to acknowledge their humanity. But Rozana did.
It's amazing. I look at that and I think we heard from Ron that 90% of Palestinians don't trust Israelis. It's probably not a surprising number. So I imagine that some of these people are being helped by Wheels of Hope. Initially are deeply skeptical of the fact that they're going to have to put this strong desire, this need for treatment that exists. It's tantalizingly possible. But at the same time, they'd start off with a deep skepticism of the Israeli partners in this. Do you see that, how hard it is to break that down? And have you seen that happen in real life, how people suddenly realize, maybe there's a lot more humanity involved than the overarching view of the two populations?
I see it on daily basis, Hugh. I see it, and I'm proud of how people can connect with no facilitators, with no five-star hotels setting. They can connect on levels and trust each other in ways that nobody can imagine. Personally, my sister has a kid who has osteogenesis imperfecta. He needs to travel to Jerusalem sometimes in his journey, in his illness journey. He needs to travel to get medication in a hospital in Jerusalem. More than once, he got the ride with someone from Road to Recovery. They didn't get to know each other on first name basis, but still they are friends and they are talking to each other, my sister and the person who drove her. I will tell you also a story about when my sister was trying to get a permit to take her son to Jerusalem. She needed someone to guarantee that she is not gonna do any harm when she is in Jerusalem. So she was explaining her case to a soldier in the DCO, which is the office that gives permits for Palestinians to travel to Israel. This soldier, when he was desperate to find someone to guarantee that, he personally put himself in harm's way to give her that guarantee. And that was a 10-minute talk. It didn't take traveling to Oslo in order to do it. It was in that DC office when that soldier just stripped himself out of his soldier uniform and saw that this is important for this woman, this mother, to take her kid to Jerusalem, and it's not gonna compromise Israel's security. And so this is, when we talk about polls, I think trust is between leaders, but people, we have 180,000 workers who cross the checkpoints on daily basis and go and work in Israel. And when there are holidays between, whether Jewish or Muslim or Christian, these people pick up the phone and wish each other, better holidays. So I think the polls are true, but they are not representing the people-to-people community, which is always under attack, by the way, because we're accused of not changing the status quo. We are the only group that should be blamed for not changing the status quo, while we are changing and transforming people's lives on daily basis.
Tim Costello, we see some of the emotion there from Huda about this, and all sort of top-down, diplomatic efforts, NGO efforts, political efforts have all their metrics. And I just have a sense from what Huda's talking about, from what Vivian's talking about, is that these are almost immeasurables, they're intangibles. How important are they? World Vision work both sides of the divide there in the Middle East. How important is what you've just heard there?
Well, what Huda and Vivian both have really said is, what does it mean to be human? And the contest today is really our humanity. That is highly contested. And Huda particularly was talking about hope, and that story with her sister, empathy, and the emotion when someone, in this case, a Israeli soldier, shows empathy and takes a personal risk. So immediately you are being driven back to reframing, what does it mean to be human? And look, that's the contest in terms of hope. If I had $1 for every time I hear Australians say nothing will solve the conflict between Israeli and Palestinians, nothing will work, giving them a leave pass to actually do anything or hope or have agency in giving, maybe, because hope is paralyzed. Sometimes my mob, I'm a Baptist minister, sees Christians say, well, hope's translated into the future, and it will only be when Jesus comes and somehow that will restore the Middle East with peace. Again, it paralyzes it. It pushes it into the future, and I get a leave pass now. I don't actually have to do anything. Look, the remarkable thing, and I've stood in the queues in Gaza with women and children coming out for medical treatment and seen the fear and the wait, and sometimes the profound uncertainty about what am I going to. I've stood in those queues coming out of Eretz Israel, and I've just been struck by the common humanity that if we can strip away category and ideology and have that ripple effect of here is another human, You know, I often think about this with people who may be ideologically against homosexuals, against gay marriage, until there's a gay person in their family, and find this extraordinary journey because they know someone, their ideological categories and objections seem to float away. So Rozana and Wheels of Hope, ripple effect of ever increasing ripples of people discovering their humanity, that they can trust, that there isn't just the layered, frozen enemy pictures on top. It really is about discovering humanity.
Well, one of the things which was really striking in my reporting life and my travels just in the Middle East is in Israel, there's a lot of stress, daily stress. There's a security stress, etc. When you go to Gaza, it is all of that multiplied by, another order. And I've often wondered in Gaza how I would survive under those conditions. You talk about hope, things going off to the future. How, what are the tendrils that you can cling to somewhere that say there can be a better way? This is the thing which really strikes me about it. I'll ask our other panelists, but I'll go back to you on this, Tim, on the question of what Australians, I think, who may not feel as if they have much of a dog in the fight, can nevertheless be part of a force for good by recognizing what Wheels of Hope is trying to do.
Yeah, look, we showed at World Vision, and that's the biggest Australian charity, raising $400 million a year, that when you put a child in the picture and say to Australians, you can make a difference for this child. You're not going to change the politics. You're not going to overturn sometimes corruption and, well, let's be honest, human evil in power and malevolence, but you can change this child's life. People respond, and that's what Wheels of Hope is about. It's a child. And as I saw with those mothers crossing from Gaza with sick children, it's actually about this extraordinary sense, I'm not alone, I matter. I think the one thing all humans cry out for desperately is, do I matter? And when someone is there, when they're transporting you, even if they're coming from the enemy picture, that profound sense that I matter is what I think all Australians can actually pick up and say, I want to communicate, I can communicate through Wheels of Hope that I'm standing with you. You're not utterly vulnerable. You're not alone. I see you. I know your name. You matter. That for me is the pitch, Hugh.
And Vivian, do you see that melting away of the sort of skepticism and the fear that might exist in some of these people? They've got their own stresses just because of the health issues that have brought them to you in the first place. But have you seen?
I wanted to tell you the story of so many people, patients or their parents, or the people who accompany them, have asked me if we get paid for driving because they can't wrap their heads around the fact that we're volunteers and that we're volunteers from Israel. It's not that we're from abroad. What motivates us to do this? And once they understand, yes, that we are volunteers and maximum what we get, or some of us who need it, will get their gas paid for. And that's what I guess your part of the fundraising is for, covering those expenses, because they're not covering the expenses of the drivers themselves. They are deeply, deeply moved, and inevitably, I drive in a van, so I can take 8 people with me each time. And I get kisses on both cheeks from every woman and child that I drive at the end, with tears in their eyes, both of us. And the other thing I wanted to say is, actually, my sister and brother each live in Canada, and they do not necessarily share all of my progressive views, political views. They each asked if they could accompany me on one of my trips. And at the end of that trip, they understood the deepest meaning of humanitarian gesture. And I think that that's what you were relating to, Tim.
You made reference to money and the fact that you're not paid, of course. A volunteer organization makes very good use of money. What do you need money for? If people donate money, Vivian, what difference does that make to what you're doing on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I don't have the details because I am a volunteer, and my kibbutz actually covers the cost of the gas and the car for all of us volunteers, so that they are actually contributing to the funding of Road to Recovery. So I think Ron is in a better position to talk about the funding.
Okay, I might leave that to Ron perhaps in his wrap up towards the end there. But Huda, what are you seeing in terms of if people want to donate money? It seems to me as if it's a very good return on investment because it doesn't go to vast, semi-governmental structures or anything. It gets on the ground pretty easily. Why is the money needed, do you think?
The money is needed because it's not only about how stories are transformed, it's about co-resisting together as human beings, to co-resist all structures that makes us enemies. And in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it's always about, seeing the Palestinians as the underdogs, as the ones who on the receiving end of some of these donations. But it's also it's not that. It's actually about witnessing and standing by those who are vulnerable among us, by changing the way they are looking at themselves as victims, helping them be more resilient and more giving them more capacity to break out of that vicious victimhood circle. When you see me, when you stand by me, when I'm struggling to exist on my own place, when I am trying to find a dignified way to build a relationship with the other, when I fight my own demons in order to believe that the other is not entirely a monster who's coming after me to finish me, then you are actually creating a space for more reconciliation, more dignified way of reconciliation, rather than just thinking of one entity as the strongest and the other is the weakest. Both Israelis and Palestinians in that sense are equal when it comes to doing co-resistance together. And for that, you people who are in the world trying to help the Israelis and Palestinians, one of the things that you are doing, first of all, you are stopping that ridiculous polarization over Israel and Palestine, that white and black way of looking at Israel and Palestine. You're standing by the Israelis and Palestinians who are suffering on daily basis. You're giving them a chance to grow together, to reconcile together, to co-resist together, to coexist together, against all the structures around them that wants them not to do that. You are part of their struggle. You are part of their way to be resilient. You are part of the way they can take down walls of hatred and build something that is very, very dignifying to both and very, very liberating for both. So it's not just about the amount of money that you are giving to Rozana or to Wheels of Hope. You are giving people a chance to know that they are witnessed, and that there are people who are marching with them in their struggle for liberation, both Israelis and Palestinians. And in that way, you are giving equal grounds for both of them to fight together against injustice. And by fighting, I mean by dignifying their humanity and leveling their human sense of existence.
I'll ask the same question, Huda, of Vivian, in a sense, but I'll put it to you first. Do you find that you're treated with a degree of suspicion for even seeking to make these connections?
Absolutely. We are in a conflict zone, and every mainstream media around us is telling us that the other is a monster. I mean, the polls are saying it all. But what can we do in order to change these dynamics, in order to change the status quo? Because guess who is benefiting from the status quo? Only the ones who claim that they are strong. So they are taking people's agency, sense of humanity. So that's why I believe that it's important for us to talk even to the most the non-believers. That's why I believe in inclusivity. That's why I think the road to recovery, when they get someone in their car, they don't think if this person is X, Y, or Z. It's just a person who needs help, and they are helping themselves as road to recovery drivers by helping the Palestinians without putting labels on that. So I do believe that there is a degree of suspicion and distrust from both sides, but it melts away when people see each other as equals and and see that they are partners in a journey from pain to recovery.
Vivian, I must put it to you as well. Do you meet with suspicion or skepticism in your own community for the work that you do?
Yeah, during the 2014 war, the first few days of that war, I was still driving. We were still able to drive. And I'd asked in the dining room for help to put in a child's car seat in my car. And somebody at the table said, "Wait a second, are you still driving patients this week from Gaza?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." And they said, "Well, how could you do something like that?" And I said, "Because I can separate between humanitarianism and the conflict, and no matter what is happening in the conflict." And that person turned to me and said, "You are a traitor and you should be shot." And I was so aghast and shaken. I stood up and left the table. And I really haven't recovered from that, because I understood how controversial this could be, just this small step that we're taking towards the other to humanize what people who have been demonized. And that's tragic. But it just strengthens my resolve to continue, because I don't think we have any choice if we want to remain true to our values.
It's interesting, isn't it, Tim? Because in a sense, in supporting this as a project, it's not just a matter of money or what might happen at the end of it, but it's really taking a stand for the moral courage that we see, in solidarity with the moral courage of the people that we see, like Huda and Vivian and so many more.
Yeah, absolutely. What Vivian said then just shocked me, and I can imagine in her community that sense of her utter aloneness in that moment. And I just want to pay tribute to you, Vivian, for what you said, because at the end of the day, only transcending the categories that lock us into the other as an enemy, it's the only way forward. We have no other way forward. And when I think how this challenge is very profound, I can only go to my faith, and my faith where Jesus said, "Love your enemies." It would have been more practical advice if he'd said, "Avoid your enemies." That makes sense. Or tolerate your enemies would have been harder. But love your enemy. Obviously, he believed that your enemy carries the image of God, and therefore you can't do violence to them. Love can transform them from being an enemy. So this goes profoundly deep for me, the story that Vivian told and that Huda's telling, and I don't live there, I've just visited a number of times, in terms of what our finest humanity is, what we have to transcend. And my experience both in the West Bank, Gaza and in Israel is how shocked I was that people lived in a bubble. They lived so close, virtually cheek by jowl, but they didn't know each other, other than the stereotypical enemy fiend-build pictures of the other. And the most moving encounters I've had in my many trips there have been people sitting together, the circle of the bereaved, Palestinians and his Jewish Israeli parents who've lost a child, and actually saying we can't agree on politics, we don't know what the solution is, but we can agree that our grief says we must refine our agency. We must do something. And for me, that courage, that sense of transcendence is ennobling. It moved me and it inspired me, and that's what Wheels of Hope does.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. I realize that I've left perhaps at least some members of the audience, people who are watching this, a little bit in the dark on one of the most fundamental questions, and that is that why is it necessary to get Palestinian patients, adults and children, to hospitals in Israel? Can you explain that a little bit, perhaps, Vivian, and then maybe Huda chime in?
Well, I can speak mostly about Gaza and the fact that their hospitals are so under-equipped and understaffed. So when they're facing patients in crisis, they need to get to places either on the West Bank, if it's possible, and we also drive patients to the border with the West Bank, and then they keep going to Jenin or other West Bank cities. But mostly, they need to get to Israeli hospitals with the expertise and with the equipment that's available. Unfortunately, that inequity between the sides is deep, and it exists, and this is one way to overcome it.
And Huda, what's your experience from the Palestinian side of medical conditions and what is possible in some of those first world hospitals that are there in Israel?
Well, there was a story, Rozana, also, and the road to recovery was the star of it. A friend of mine who's a doctor got a brain stroke that almost paralyzed him. And I got a phone call at 12 a.m. in the morning, and they were asking for help. And I called someone from Road to Recovery. And from 1 to 3 a.m. in the morning, Road to Recovery managed to get us a permit and an ambulance to carry that patient from Hebron to Hadassah, because the hospital in Hebron was not prepared to do an operation on his brain that immediately. So they did all the connections between the doctors in both sides, and we've managed to get this doctor. He was a doctor also, who was treated in a very good way, although he was a very hardliner when it comes to Palestine and Israel. His first comment to me after he recovered from the surgery that went for like 12 hours at Hadassah and Karim, he was like, I could not believe that the enemy was operating in my brain. And I wish I was here the first time I got it was his second brain stroke. I could have not been fully, I could have been fully recovered rather than partially. And it's to me to have Rozana doing and road to recovery, to do the getting the permit, talking to authorities from both sides, getting the money in the bank to do that, having someone staying up in all night to do all of that coordination, getting a medical team to be on the Israeli ambulance and a Palestinian medical team to be on the Palestinian ambulance, trying to find the way in order to safely get that patient from one ambulance to another without compromising his life, and then operating for 12 hours on his brain. For a whole week he was there in that hospital. And to me, it's not just, one of the doctors was a Palestinian doctor working in Hadassah. He drove from Jenin to Jerusalem. So these stories that you cannot put money on, and you cannot also put them on mainstream media for many reasons, because they are not bloody, because they are just showing the humanity of both people. But to me, it's how Rozana uses this work in order to do multiple layers of negotiations in order to get the Palestinians and the Israelis in a place where they can heal together. The second story is during COVID-19 time, when Rozana managed to get us in Dura one of the ventilators that was needed for patients with severe conditions of corona. And that machine saved two of my cousins who were on the verge of being, of not, getting through it. And I always mention that because this is not about Israelis and Palestinians anymore. It's about people standing together against all the systems that want us not to be together, against all the systems that dehumanizes us. And it's the only way in order to change the way people interact, not only in Israel and Palestine, but in the world.
Healing together, Huda. Those are fabulous and powerful stories, and we'll end it there because we've got a little video to show people. But it's been such a privilege to hear from you, to feel connected, if only for this brief time, with you, Huda Abu Akob, there in Dura, in Hebron, Vivian Silva at Kibbutz Berry on the Gaza border there in Israel, and Tim Costello in exotic Melbourne. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
And I hope those watching, I hope you'll join me. I've through Ron Silver's gentle and persistent persuasion, have become very happy and proud to be a financial supporter of Project Rozana and Wheels of Hope. And I hope everyone watching this will do so as well. And we'll finish my segment of it at least by introducing a new video that's come from Project Rozana. It's called Abdullah's Journey.
كل يومي في المستشفى، كل يومي. ما في آيات يعني علاج إلا الغسيل، بعد الغسيل إلى زراعة كبد وكلى. شو بدي أشوف؟ بقول الحمد لله، يعني مشي وضعي، يعني البيت بنظف، بطعم الأولاد، يعني بخلي حالي طبيعي، يعني طبيعة لكل الخمس الأولاد، يعني مش بس لعبد الله. كيف بتروح أنت من الدار هنا على الدليزة على القدس؟
بغسل دماغي.
ليش بتغسل؟
عشان أصطلح، عشان بزرع، عشان نعيش.
عشان تعيش.
أنا حبيت أتطوع عشان أنا يعني شفت معاناة المرضى، وأنا بالنهاية يعني إنه إحنا نحب نساعد الناس. أنا بشعر اتجاه عبد الله بالحب، إنه أخ واحد من إخوتي، إنه بالنهاية يعني بني آدم بشر، إنه يعني طفل زي هذا المفروض إنه الكل يحبه.
something small that I can do that makes a difference in her life, makes a difference, a small difference in my life, and they feel like I'm sharing some of the weight of her story. When I approach the checkpoint, I don't feel really safe. There's so much to our reality that my eyes aren't open to, aren't aware of. I think that the more we see each other as human beings, with each one with a story, with a life, with issues, with problems, and as mirrors of ourselves in other ways, it'll help us get off the questions of who's right and who's wrong, but how we can live next to each other in a more accepting and caring way.
Wow. I just wanted to let you know that unfortunately the story of Abdallah has a sad ending. Abdallah, despite his strong will, didn't make it. But the relationships between Abdallah, Abdullah's family, and the network of drivers, they remain, and they remain strong and intact. Thank you, Hugh, for your masterful moderation of our panel discussion. Thank you, Huda, Tim, and Vivian, for your inspiring and insightful contributions. We're indebted to you for making the time to share your thoughts and experiences with us. To all of you who've given up your time this Sunday evening or day, thank you for joining us. You're part of a growing global community of supporters of Project Rozana. If you haven't already, I would ask you to please scroll down to the donate link on this Project Rozana Wheels of Hope campaign page and donate generously. Your support will ensure that the Wheels of Hope, which supports 3 NGOs, 2 Israeli ones, Road to Recovery and Humans Without Borders, and the Palestinian Greenland Society, supports them taking children and their carers from their homes to hospitals in Israel, that this program will keep on turning. Finally, my thanks also to my colleagues Ruth, Rosemary, Dorit, and Mandy for facilitating this event, and a special thank you to Tom Kreiser for the production. Good evening. God bless. Thank you.